I want to take a moment to talk about something President Biden said during his farewell address. He warned the free press is crumbling in this country. I would add that's only if we, the people, let that happen. Journalists exist to seek the truth, to tell people stories, to lift up voices that may not be heard otherwise, to shine a light on injustice, and to hold the powerful accountable. We are not the enemy of the people. We are the defenders of the people.
All right, now we're going to bring in Isaac Shore to see if that statement was full of crap. Isaac writes at Mediaite, he's an interesting cat. He's often criticizes conservative media. We're going to talk about that, but also criticizes mainstream media and certainly the libs as well. So Isaac, I want to talk about conservative media in a second, but Acosta says that the mainstream media, defenders of the people. Is that true?
Well, I mean, journalists have an important role in our country. I don't think anyone with a head on their shoulders would argue otherwise. But sometimes when there are people like Jim who go on television every day, who are highly, highly paid, very well compensated, very famous, enjoy all the trappings of this wonderful lifestyle, and they just wax poetic about their incredible role and their own objectivity and how they're defenders of democracy, it's just exhausting to me. Jim Acosta is not a very, I actually appreciate that he's recently left CNN and is going and doing his own thing with his own independent commentary, because there's no pretense of this kind of objective professionalism now. He's just Jim Acosta saying what he thinks, and that's fair enough. But some of this, standing on a podium, kind of handing a medal out to himself that he did at CNN was truly exhausting, in my opinion.
Yeah, look, I think guys like Jim Acosta are not bad guys at all. I think that they're good folks, and I'd even say honest, and then people get mad. What do you mean, like mainstream media honest? They're not honest at all. So no, I think they're wrong, but there's a difference between wrong and dishonest. And I'm sure that if he's watching this, he'd get all animated about it. What do you mean? Look, guys, it's all money in politics, and so everyone on mainstream media plays this nonsense game. It's total utter theater about, what did Senator Bob think, and what did Senator Susie think? They don't think anything. They just get a check and then they do as they're told by their donors. And so if you're not covering the donors' influence in policy, you're not doing journalism at all. You just don't realize it. So I don't think they're evil. I don't think it's a cabal. I just don't think that they get it at all. So that's why mainstream media is having the problems that they are. But you write about conservative media as well, and you wrote this piece that I found interesting, and then you had one today too that was also interesting about Ukraine in particular. But before we get to Ukraine, you said it's gonna be kind of a test, the Trump administration is, of conservative media. Tell us what you mean by that.
I mean, I think back to the first Trump administration, and throughout his whole 2016 campaign, there was a lot of criticism of Donald Trump from kind of the conservative infrastructure. Names that you would find shocking today: Molly Hemingway, Mark Levin. I mean, these people, called themselves never Trumpers and were very proud of it. And over the course of the first Trump administration, you saw people's views on this change, which is fair enough. They liked a lot of what he did. I think that's totally reasonable. I think it's completely reasonable to change your view of, whether it's worthwhile to put him in the Oval Office or not. But that is distinct from kind of merging into an arm of, the Trump political operation, which I think a lot of these people have ended up kind of taking on that role, even though they're in the media. And you kind of saw the lines get blurrier and blurrier and blurrier over the course of his first administration. And so, this first piece that I wrote for Mediaite, it is about, I believe I wrote it the day after the inauguration. And, there was a lot of celebration of all things Trump on Inauguration Day and the day after. But there were also some things that I think that if you told, conservatives that they'd be ignoring it, 10 years ago, they would they wouldn't believe you. They'd probably punch you in the mouth. Whether that's pardons for people who were attacking cops on January 6th, whether that is, in my view, illegally failing to enforce the TikTok ban that was passed by Congress and signed into law by President Biden. I think that any constitutional conservative worth their salt should be making us think about that. And that doesn't mean that they need to be, denouncing Trump as the most evil man since Hitler. It doesn't mean that at all. But they should be accurately describing what he's actually doing. Otherwise, what's the point of conservative media?
Yeah. So Isaac, I got a lot of thoughts about that. But first, my guess based on reading your writing is that you're conservative. Are you conservative? Are you willing to share that? I'm curious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So you are okay. That makes sense. And so, and I asked that because it now it's becoming a little bit more common, and that's going to go to the main point that I want to make here. But in the old days, conservative criticizing conservative media would have been unacceptable. And so that's what I want to run by you. That Trump's first term and Trump's second term could potentially be very, very different, because I think that conservative media has changed. I think that in the old days, it was basically just Fox News, and they were just the propaganda machine, and they'd spit out talking points, and then it would go to talk radio, and then whatever websites existed, and they were all on the same page. And so it was so uninteresting having conversations with Republicans or going on right-wing shows, because I knew I was going to get Sean Hannity's talking points, one after another, an assembly line of it. Now, I think conservative media is all over the place in a good way. I see still the lion's share of conservative media going, if Trump does it, then it must be okay, right? And even things, to your point, that they would have never agreed to before, is the minute Trump does it, it's totally fine. That's still, in my opinion, the lion's share. But now you're seeing interesting disagreements. Bannon does media, he's doing the war room, he's attacking Elon Musk. That would have never happened in the past when you had the assembly line of talking points. And then you've got different, like Dave Smith is an interesting person. He's a libertarian, not conservative libertarian, but still, leans right. But he agrees with us on Israel, and you disagree with other conservatives on Ukraine. So, am I overhyping that, or do you see the same thing I'm seeing, where they've begun to have slightly different opinions because of all the different shows out there?
No, I mean, there's certainly been a lot of segmentation, and there's a lot of different avenues for people to get their views out there. It's not, people aren't only reliant on, say, a Fox News. They're still certainly the biggest player in conservative media. There's no doubt about that. But there are a lot of different avenues to get out there, and there's a lot of different places to go if you have certain views. Now, I do think there is maybe a little bit of danger in that as well. I think that there's a lot more. I mean, I'm sure people like you would say, Fox News has always been spewing garbage, but I would say there is generally there are benefits to having some editorial standards and having some kind of structure there. Where I think today there are shining examples of independent creators who are doing great work, interesting independent viewpoints. But I would also say that there are people who are maybe off doing their independent thing, but they're still in it for the money, the fame. They are technically they're not working for the big man maybe, but all of their content is geared toward pleasing a certain faction, pleasing a certain person in Trump maybe now. So I do think what you are saying is absolutely true, but I think the story is maybe a little bit more complex.
No, I agree that it's totally complex. So look, one of the biggest factors is audience capture, because and I think probably Ben Shapiro is the best example of this. Oh, never Trump, or no. And his audience is like, boo, this is in his first term, right? As they were leading up to the first term. And then Ben Shapiro's like, yeah, I mean, I love Donald Trump. Sure. Yeah, keep it going, right? And so, and then every once in a while, if Trump says anything that slightly disagrees with Israel, back to wait a minute. So, okay, anyways, so let's talk about that, because you've got Ukraine, which is an interesting example here, and it's interesting because of how stark it is, but also how complicated it is. Stark in that Trump says that millions of people have died in Ukraine, not true. Zelensky's a dictator, not true. Polls at 4%, not true. He polls at around 60%. And what else did he do? Oh, and that the Ukraine started the war. None of those things are remotely true. So how has conservative media reacted to that? Are they parroting that? Are they pushing back against that? What have you seen?
Well, it's interesting. I would say that there are some places that are pushing back very directly on that. I would say places like National Review, my old employer, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post. I've seen, pretty scathing editorials and op-eds going at Trump over the. I mean, whatever your view is, again, on the Ukraine conflict, I think there are legitimate viewpoints to a point, but going after the outright lies that he's been telling over the last 48 hours or so. But then there's kind of this other camp, and I would say there are a lot of Fox News personalities who fit into this camp that are, these ideas are terrible. They run through these ideas. Mark Levin on his show yesterday, kind of ticked through all these very specific things that Trump had to say, all these lies. He's trashing them. He's saying, these are the ideas of Soros-funded pseudo-intellectuals. And, and then toward the end, he says that, Donald Trump is uniquely suited to bring peace to the region. And it's like, the guy responsible for propagating all these lies that you just denounced very capably and very stridently, now you're pumping up him. You can't even identify that he was mad. I wrote an article about this for Media. He was mad that we covered it and said, these people hate Trump. No, it's not about hating Trump. It's just about acknowledging reality and being honest with your audience about who's pushing these ideas that you say are so wrong-headed.
Yeah, so that gets us, I think, to the very core of this, which is that are conservative viewers and listeners going to demand better? Or are they going to demand compliance to Trump? And I don't know the answer to that. And by the way, this is not purely a conservative problem at all. We know better than anyone else. Like some portions of the left, if you say, hey, I disagree 5%, or we should listen to the other side, et cetera, will tell you, no, don't you dare. No, we have to call the racist, all of them racist, fascist, Nazis, et cetera. And so there are folks who don't want to hear it on the left. There are certainly tons of folks who don't want to hear it on the right if it displeases them, even if it's true, right? And then, by the way, again, not just the far right and far left, but you had establishment Democrats who are like, I don't want you to tell me Joe Biden's old. I want you to tell me that Joe Biden's young. Yep, that's what I want, right? And then people gave it to them. They're like, oh yeah, he's 37, he's great. Yeah. He's young and dynamic, you got this, right? And people gave it to them in droves. That's audience capture because they're gonna make money off of that. So what do you think? Do the viewers and listeners at some point wisen up, or do they just keep asking to have their feelings protected, and in this case, Trump's feelings protected?
Yeah, audience capture, agreed, is probably the single biggest problem in media right now. Well, I'm of the opinion, and you'll hear this, we have to respect our audience. We have to meet our audience where they are. Well, respecting your audience is telling them the truth, right? It's not telling them what they want to hear. They're adults, right? You have respect for their capabilities. Then you should tell them the truth about either the facts on the ground or what you think about them. So that's the first thing. And, I think the problem is it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy when all you do is tell them what they want to hear, or at least what you think they want to hear. They become habituated to that, and they're not receptive to any other point of view. So, in my view, it starts with telling them the truth about the facts on the ground, about what you think about them. And I have faith in my audience, at least, that even if they disagree with me, they'll appreciate that I'm giving them the truth as I see it.
Yeah, two last questions for you. One is, and this is a tough one because they both have their big upsides and downsides. Who's better, mainstream media or online media?
I mean, that's a tough question because I mean, there is, if we're, let's say, the New York Times and mainstream media, they do essential reporting that, there are places, I'm a huge critic of the New York Times, but, they're doing a lot of original source reporting that is very, very valuable. So I think from that perspective, mainstream media is very useful. But I think maybe if you're looking for commentary and you're looking for interesting ideas and interesting thoughts and interesting debates, I mean, I don't see that in the op-ed pages of the New York Times very often. Every once in a while, there's a good guest writer. There's maybe 2 to 3 columnists I think are good there. And so I would say on that end, maybe online media is giving you a bigger wealth of perspectives, and people feel a little bit more free, I think, to address issues that are maybe a little more taboo in mainstream media.
Yeah. So look, obviously I'm biased. I'm in online media. I'm going to say online media, but that's not why I'm saying it. If you believe me, which is the real reason is that mainstream media. You're absolutely right. The editorial standards matter. I'm glad that they have them. New York Times has done brilliant reporting in the past. If that's all they did, then I would love it. And I want them to be better. I don't want them to get hurt. I don't want them to go out of business. I don't want any of that. I just want them to do real journalism. But the mainstream media tells so many lies so effectively that I think it does more damage. And so I can give you a dozen examples, but the big lie is the most important one, which is that the politicians are honest people having real, genuine debates about policy. No, they're 95% of the time, the person with more money wins, whether they're Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative, no matter what their policies are, the person with more money wins. And when they get into office, they vote with their donors nearly 100% of the time, yet it is never, ever, ever reported that way. Whenever you're discussing a bill, well, okay, what do they think and what does Lindsey Graham think? Nonsense, nonsense. Look, okay, they would say I'm extreme. I would pretty much almost only report on the donors because they're the only ones that are relevant. But by God, if you're not reporting on the donors, you're massively lying to your audience as if they don't exist and as if they're not an enormous factor on what passes and doesn't pass. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there are, examples where I would agree with you, and I think that there's maybe not enough coverage of donors and donors' interests for sure. I think I would maybe break with you a little bit. I actually think that politicians are probably a little more. At least, I think maybe there was a time where your perspective had a lot of merit in my view, and I still think it does. But I think that in the age of mass media, online media, social media, and kind of the segmentation we were talking about earlier, I think politicians are very responsive to different forces. So, for example, in the Republican Party right now, they're very responsive to Trump and to Trump's wants, and for the sake of their constituencies, they're trying to please him. And in the Democrats' case, I think there are a lot of interest groups, whether that's teachers' unions, whether that's public sector unions, whether that's activist groups, that they are very beholden to and that they are absolutely terrified of getting on the wrong side of. So, I mean, I agree. I would absolutely acknowledge that, donor interests are a huge issue. But I think that some of these other groups and interests are also playing a huge role today.
Yeah, they affect groupthink for sure. So I wouldn't dismiss them as irrelevant, but I think it's a small role. And remember, a lot of the unions are also donors. So that's true.
That is true.
Yeah. So all right, last thing is the prediction. So we don't know. We're guessing based on the clues that we have here. We both see conservative media has changed a little bit. We both see that they're still mainly beholden to Trump. So 4 years is a long time. By the end, has conservative media gotten more honest and is challenging Trump on a regular basis, or are they still mainly in lockstep 4 years from now?
I mean, I would say there's going to be, well, I don't know. I think that you're going to see the Wall Street Journal and National Review and a lot of some of the free press. I think you're going to see a lot of these more online, a little bit more independent stuff. Obviously, the Journal's a huge enterprise, but they're kind of the exception in that group. I think they're only going to get more critical. I mean, Trump is at really the peak of his powers right now. His approval rating, I think it's dipping now, but it's really never been higher, generally speaking. So, and they're already kind of coming out guns a-blazing. So I think those entities are going to keep it up. But that being said, I mean, I don't think that his hold on the Fox News of the world is going to be relinquished at all. I mean, you see CPAC. I mean, it is the joke is that it's TPAC now, and it truly is TPAC. I mean, Steve Bannon's up there saying we want Trump to run in 2028. I think that you're going to see a bifurcation there in terms of Trump's hold on the media landscape.
God, I'm so curious how that stuff flies. So, and look at this crazy world we live in now, where Bannon is right about raising corporate taxes rather than lowering corporate taxes. Elon Musk is wrong, and Trump is wrong. But on the other hand, when Bannon says run again in 2028, oh my God, I hope no one in conservative media really goes in that direction. If they go in that direction, then they're going to prove the Democrats right about everything, that they were authoritarian all along. And by the reason I care is I don't want the good name of populism like ruined by these clowns if they go in a dictatorial direction, because God knows mainstream media has enough, hates populism enough anyway. I mean, that's another thing. We're out of time, but like next time maybe we'll talk about whether mainstream media even exists in 4 years. I mean, yeah. Right? I mean, a lot of these cable companies might go under, and so I mean, you want to talk about at the ebb of their power? They are hurt, dog. Don't ask them if they're all right. So, and Isaac, then we could also debate the issues, because Isaac and I don't agree on a bunch of things. So fun for everybody. Look, it's a brand new world. It's a brand new world where we get to have these conversations, and it's not just talking points, but it's actually two human beings talking to one another. All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us, Isaac. And everybody check him out on Mediaite. He really does good work. Whether I agree or disagree with him, he's a thoughtful guy, and that's important. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Isaac.